Okay, today we're going to be doing 2.2 extension, which is talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. You need to have two pieces of paper out, one being your RPJ, and you are going to be using pages 31 and 32. So get those out. And then second, a piece of paper for notes. So go ahead and get those two out, and then I'll begin the notes. Let's start with parallel lines. So parallel lines we've actually been talking about for the last couple days. So what you need to know about parallel lines is one, they never intersect. I think of railroad tracks. They never intersect. And two, they have the same slope. So we're going to continue that idea from yesterday of finding slope and comparing it. So if you look in this example above, this blue line up here has a slope of 1/2, and this red one down here has a slope of 1/2. So these two lines are parallel because the slope is the same. So let's look at page 31 in your RPJ. Looking at number 1, it asks which lines are parallel and how do you know? So we have 3 lines here, and they represent that as line B, line R, and line G. So we need to find the slope of all of those. So I'm going to start with B, and we're going to find that slope. So remember, to find slope, we use rise over run. So I'm going to count the slope of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a rise of 5 and a run of 1, 2, 3. So the slope of line B is 5 over 3. Now I'm going to do that middle line, or the line R. So I'm going to find the slope of this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2. So red has a slope of 5 over 2. So the last one I'm going to do is line G. So why don't you go ahead and see if you can figure out the slope of line G. You should have gotten 5 over 3. So looking at these two, and I'm asking myself which two are parallel, lines B and G have identical slopes. So the two lines that are parallel are lines B and G. So I want you to take a minute with your table partner, and I want you to try number 2. Find the slope of line B, R, and G, and then figure out which one is parallel. Go ahead. Okay, so for line B, you should have gotten 9 over 1. For line R, you should have gotten 9 over 1. And for the green one, you should have gotten 10 over 1. So the lines that are parallel are lines B and R. So let's try another one. It asks, are the given lines parallel, and explain your reasoning. So number 3, I have a coordinate plane on here, so if you want to go ahead and draw one on your notes, you can go ahead and do that. So I have the lines y equals 2 and y equals 4. So remember, we can make a table to help us graph. So let's start with y equals 2. So I'm going to plug in -1, 0, 1, and I'm going to put 2's all the way down. So now I'm going to graph that. So there's my first line with y equals 2 in red. Then I'm going to graph y equals -4. So again, I'm going to make my table. Again, I'm going to use -1, 0, and 1 for x. And then -4 all the way down for y. And I'm going to go ahead and graph that. Get my 3 points. And I'm going to draw my line. So looking at my graph, I can say, yes, they are parallel. And I know this because they have the same slope. What is the slope of one horizontal line? It is 0. So they both have a slope of 0. So why don't you try number 4 with your table group? Tell me, is x equals 3 and x equals -3 parallel? So I'm going to go ahead and make my table. And for this one, I'm going to put 3 in the x all the way down, and then -1, 0, and 1 for the y. And I'm going to graph those 3. And I now have this vertical line. And then I'm going to do the same for x equals -3. And plug -1, 0, and 1 all the way down. So looking at these two, are they parallel? And we can say yes. Again, they have the same slope. And this time, they both have a slope of undefined. So now let's talk about perpendicular lines. So perpendicular lines create a 90-degree angle. They create a 90-degree angle. And you know that they are perpendicular when their slopes are opposite reciprocals. So for example, if you have a slope of 1/2, the opposite of a positive 1/2 would be negative, and the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. So the opposite reciprocal is -2/1. Also, when you multiply these two, they should equal -1. So that's a nice little check. If you multiply these two slopes, it should give you an answer of -1. So I want you to try. Tell me, what is the opposite reciprocal of 2/5? Go ahead. You should have said -5/2. Let's try one more. What is the opposite reciprocal of -3? You should have said 1/3. So that's what we're going to be looking for, is are your slopes opposite of each other and are they the reciprocal? So let's look at page 32 in your RPJ. Instead of looking if the lines are parallel, now we're going to see if the lines are perpendicular. So we have the same lines of B, R, and G. So the same as before, we're going to start off by finding the slope. So I'm going to start with line B, which is this middle one right here. And right away, just by looking at it, I can tell that it's positive. So I'm going to find the slope and I'm going to count up and over. And when I do that, I get 6 over 6, which is the same thing as a positive 1. Next, I'm going to do the R line, which is this one right here. And I can tell just by looking at it that it's negative. So when I count up and over, I get 3 over negative 3, which is negative 1. And then finally, I'm going to do this G line, which I can tell again by looking at it that it's positive. So I'm going to count up and over, and I get a slope of 1 over 7. So now I need to think, okay, which ones have opposite reciprocal slopes, or which two, when I multiply them, give me negative 1. So here I can look, those, the two that are reciprocal would be lines B and R, because 1 is the same thing as 1 over 1, and negative 1 is the same thing as 1 over negative 1. Those two are opposites, and they're actually the reciprocal, and when I multiply them together, it gives me negative 1. So with your table, go ahead and try this second one. Find the slope of each line, and then figure out which two are perpendicular. Okay, for line B, you should have gotten 10 over 2, which is the same thing as 5 over 1, or just 5. For the R line, you should have gotten 4 over 1. And for the G line, you should have gotten negative 1 over 4. So looking at these three slopes, I need to think which one is opposite reciprocal, or which two, when multiplied together, gives me negative 1, and that would be lines R and G. So let's try these ones. Are these given lines perpendicular? And explain your reasoning. So for this first one, I have x equals 0 and y equals 3. So just like before, I'm going to start off by making my table of x and y. And with x equals 0, I'm just going to fill in 0 all the way down, and negative 1, 0, and 1 right there. And I'm going to go ahead and graph this. So there's my first line. Then I'm going to do y equals 3 in blue. So I'm going to make my table. And for x, I'm going to pick negative 1, 0, and 1. And I'm going to pick 3 all the way down. And so I'm going to go ahead and graph that. So now when I'm comparing these two lines, I'm wondering, are they perpendicular? And one of the first things I told you about perpendicular lines is they create a 90-degree angle. And these two lines do. So yes, they are perpendicular. Their slopes are opposite reciprocal, with one of the slopes being 0, the blue one, and the red one being undefined, which are opposite reciprocal. So yes, because they have opposite reciprocal slopes, and they form a 90-degree angle. So at your table group, I want you to try number 9. Go ahead and graph it, and then tell me, are they perpendicular? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and graph y equals 2. I'm not going to put my table on here. You should have used that. But you should have y equals 2 right here. And then y equals 1/2 right here. And the answer would be no, they are not perpendicular. They have the same slope, which means they are parallel. So I want you to try this one in your table group. You have 4 lines up here. You have a red one, a blue one, a green one, and a black one. I want you to find the slopes, and I want you to tell me which ones are parallel and which ones are perpendicular. So go ahead, pause the video, give yourselves about 30 seconds to a minute to figure out your slopes and talk about which 2 are parallel, which 2 are perpendicular. Go ahead. So for the black line, I had a slope of -2. For the red line, I had a slope of 1/3. For the blue line, I had a slope of 1/2. And for the green line, I had a slope of 1/3. So compare your slopes to mine. So looking at this information now, let's figure out which 2 are parallel and which 2 are perpendicular. So the parallel lines, you should have said lines red and green, because they have the same slope. And for perpendicular, you have lines black and blue, because their slopes are opposite reciprocal, and they, when multiplied together, they equal -1. So with the time remaining in class, you can start your homework. You have 1 through 11 all, and you are skipping number 6. You need to import your answers onto Big Ideas tonight, and I will post this video on Edline as well in case you need to rewatch it. Have a great day, and make sure you stay seated until the bell rings, and when the bell rings, you push in your chairs and return all my materials. Thanks, and I'll see you tomorrow.